Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski as we count down the top 5 podcasts of the last 200 podcasts. It's been an honor to serve, to listen, to answer questions that we get asked on a regular basis, and I think that's what today probably is a need that so many people felt but didn't have that resource or that friend, that coach to talk to. John, introduce us to episode number 198.
Yeah, this is our third most listened to and watched episode over the last 3.5 years. The
Yeah,
hidden dangers of workaholism.
yeah,
Um, Jim, when you love what you do for a living, when work doesn't feel like work
yeah,
because you have tremendous passion and vision for it,
yeah,
you're at increased risk
yeah,
of workaholism.
yep,
Uh, and we know from personal experience, I'll just speak for myself. I know from personal experience
yep, same here.
and then the work that we've done over the last 10 years, that workaholic behavior puts leaders, their families, and their ministries at serious risk.
Yes,
And so
yeah,
today's episode unpacks 3 hidden dangers of workaholic addiction
yeah,
and then offers some what we hope to be practical help to protect yourself
yeah,
from those dangers. So Jim, that's
right on.
what's coming up.
Right on. Well, we hope that those who are watching and listening will enjoy this. Our third most
Most, yeah.
uh, attractive, listen to, useful podcast in the last 200, and that is how to have that balance and not be a workaholic. So enjoy this today. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Jim, I'm doing excellent. I'm actually doing better than I started today because I spent some time with you beforehand, and I'm just encouraged by your friendship.
Same here. Same here. I thought like episode 110 was one of the more meaningful ones we've done, talking about, just knowing when to stop. And today, if you don't know how to stop, you actually enter a category that's extraordinarily dangerous. You want to introduce the episode 111 to us?
Sure. The title is called The Hidden Dangers of Workaholism. Now, we've talked about workaholism on the pod before.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about it from a little slightly different angle today, Jim. Some of the hidden subterranean dangers of it.
Yeah.
I think about a show that I like to watch occasionally. It's called Shark Tank, and it's a pretty popular show.
Yeah.
And, it's entertaining. It's funny. It's informative. And even at times it's touching. The show reminds me about the importance of focus and passion and commitment and hard work. And I love hearing stories of people. I really love hearing stories of people who immigrated from other countries who were poor and had nothing. And they came here and they worked hard and they had a dream and now it's come to fruition. That part of Shark Tank is so inspiring to me. Yeah. But here's one thing that stands out to me when I watch that show, Jim, almost every time, and it stands out like a sore thumb to me. It's this recurring theme that is unmistakable, really. To me, it's worn as a badge of honor. It's heralded. It's applauded and cheered. And here it is. It's the idea that success comes only by working 24/7, 365 on your business.
Yeah. I've heard them say, well, if you're not sold out to this, why should I put my money into it? Because they weren't willing to, leave everything and everyone to follow their business calling like it was Jesus,
That's right.
Yeah.
And so in the world of the tank, you realize your dreams by skipping sleep, ignoring relationships, putting your health at risk. And I think about that, Jim, as much as I like to see people succeed, I often wonder, am I the only one who wonders at what cost?
Yeah.
At what cost to all of those things. And so, I think it's not just business people that get trapped into this. I do believe ministry leaders also get caught up in the workaholic side of life, the quest for growth which I don't think is bad in and of itself unless it's motivated improperly.
Right.
But oftentimes that quest for growth, Jim, it translates to saying yes to work more than to your marriage, or yes to your dream more than to your kids. Yes to success more than to a close relationship with God, right? Who, if you think about it, he's the one who called you into the ministry in the first place, right? And I think we accepted that call because he did something spectacular in our life. And yet we get that jumbled up. And so this kind of workaholic behavior puts leaders at risk. Give me some thoughts on that. And then what I'd like to jump into, Jim, after you give all of us some thoughts from your perspective, I'd like to talk about maybe 3 hidden dangers of workaholism.
Yeah, I think there's a great line from a documentary called Cool Runnings. Now, it's a Jamaican bobsled team, and Derice Banning, the lead guy, is talking to the coach. Blitzer is his name, played by John Candy, and he's talking about the gold medals. But John Candy cheated to get them, and he said it must be so great to hold a gold medal. And he says it's a wonderful thing. But he says this. He said, but if you're not enough without the gold medal, you'll never be enough with the gold medal. And I thought that's really, it's not so much workaholism, but why? Why are we working to the detriment of our health, of our relationships, of our souls? And at the same time, why are we working so hard to it? And then we get it and we go, why did I work this hard for this? Like, how many people have achieved their goals only to sit there and look at it and go, what did it cost me? And it's too late because you've already had to pay that price.
That's right. And I think we look from our businesses, from our ministries, we look for things that only God can really provide for us, right? Or relationships can only provide for us. We're expecting our ministry, our business, to provide a sense of value to us that really and truly it cannot bring to us. That's external. It's not that internal value that, hey, I'm an adopted son or daughter of Jesus Christ, that I'm loved completely before I lift a finger every morning. And so what happens is we have this conversation every week, probably half a dozen times, Jim, at minimum. I'm underestimating it probably.
Right.
Asking pastors, urging pastors and business leaders to slow down because we see a wall in their not too distant future that they don't see. And so when they don't listen, then we take another approach and say, look, here's what that wall looks like. So let me describe it to you. So that's kind of where I'd like to jump into the 3 hidden dangers of workaholism.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so here's the first one. Workaholism can lead to stupidity.
What do you mean by that, John? Don't be so vague. Yeah.
I thought we'd just start off with a bang, right?
And by the way, you said it, and we all thought of 10 stories that we know of that validate that statement. It's not too strong of a statement. People that did the stupidest things did them for this reason.
Yeah. We tend to do incredibly dumb things when we get tired.
Yes, we do.
Things that we would never do if we were well rested.
Yeah.
In Pod 110, you mentioned one of our favorite passages of scripture on this podcast. It's in Matthew chapter 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, we're not going to get exegetical on that passage today, other than to say a couple of things. Jesus is calling us to rest. He says it twice in that short passage of scripture. And he talks about his yoke being well-fitting for us. It fits us perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember back in the 1980s. I think you were born then, Jim. I was
born in the 60s. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we had the fall of the Jimmies in the 1980s, Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart. And I remember being at a conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where the keynote speaker was addressing Jimmy Swaggart's issues. And he said one thing about it. He wasn't there to be critical of Jimmy Swaggart. He just said this happened. And he said this: Jimmy Swaggart needed to play more golf.
Yeah.
Now, I was in my 20s at the time, and I heard him say that. And Jim, it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
What do you mean he needed to play more golf? He needed to spend more time with God. He needed to, but I didn't understand. But as I've gotten older, that makes perfect sense to me now, right? That there probably was this insane pace that contributed to Jimmy's failure.
Yeah.
And here's what I've observed, that the more growth that takes place in our ministry or our business, the more pace becomes an issue.
Yeah.
Becomes a challenge. And the more tempted you'll be to rationalize an out of control schedule because, God's blessing what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that first one, Jim?
Yeah. I think success has as many traps as failures, or as failure.
I think maybe more.
I think maybe more. Yeah. I don't know who's happier, the normal looking kid in the cafeteria or the prom queen. You know what I mean? Like one you think has an easier life because she's the prom queen or the captain of the football team. Mm-hmm. I just have known too many prom queens and captains of the football team. Their life isn't easier. That success has a weight to it. And when you succeed in ministry, as long as it doesn't come at the cost of other things, that's wonderful, right?
Sure.
But how easy is it to get out of balance when you're satisfied because you have the answers that no one else has? You preach the sermons that everybody wants to hear. You're the leader that everybody wants to come to their seminar. You're the writing's almost on the wall. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like when I see that happening to somebody, I go, well, it's, the writing's almost on the wall. And this isn't like national. This is like local pastors that have gone through the predictable cycles of burnout that become these behaviors that you never would have never would have dreamed. If you were around in the mid 80s, you never would have dreamed that the Jimmys had their issues. You never would have dreamed. They were, they were as big as a Billy Graham would be, or, somebody like that today. And it was such a disappointment. And, without mentioning any names, I think we can all think of national and local leaders.
Yep.
Did things so out of character. You say, how did they get there? This is how they got there.
Yes.
This is how they got there.
Almost unequivocally. And you said the word predictable.
Yeah.
This is predictable.
Yeah.
I can guarantee this.
Yeah.
That if you live your life in an extended state of exhaustion, you will do some incredibly stupid things and make some really bad decisions. And some of them will alter your life for the rest of your life. So that's one of the hidden dangers. Here's another.
If it is predictable, that also means it's preventable.
There you go.
Right? If I smoke 18 packs a day of cigarettes, it's predictable what's going to happen, but it's preventable if I stop smoking today.
Yep.
And it's the same thing here. This is not, it's just the curse of the ministry. It's not, it's foolishness. It's an infected, turned inward success that is so unhealthy for your soul. I believe if the devil can't destroy you, he'll distract you, and this success is as much a distraction as failure ever was. Just please, please, dear listeners, dear watchers, if it's predictable, it's preventable. So take these steps.
And I think some people, some leaders, and I was one of them, Jim, say that'll never happen to me.
Yeah. Right.
And you know what? It usually happens to you.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Have they ever said, hey, I'm working so hard, eventually I'm going to cheat on my wife? I don't think anybody's ever said that, right? Nope. But it isn't until the trap is sprung that you realize you're the one that actually walked into the trap.
That's right.
And it's just the wreckage, the loss of testimony, what it does to the people you love, to the church that you serve, to the kingdom. Just stop. I heard the other day that the word shalom, if there was a sign that at a crosswalk in Israel, that instead of saying stop, it would say shalom. Mm-hmm. That's what that word means, stop. So that you got to stop to be at peace, to be at rest. Sabbath, the word stop is in the word Sabbath. You have to stop. There is a predictable outcome when we ignore the laws of God, just like when we ignore the law of gravity. You will walk off a building and you'll die. You'll walk off with your limitations and you'll kill everybody around you doing it. So, yeah.
So here's the second one, second hidden danger, and that is workaholism can lead to arrogance. So stupidity is the first hidden danger. Arrogance is the second one. I think God gave us Sabbath as a gift, and there are many purposes of Sabbath, but I look at it as a weekly reset button. It's every week I'm resetting. I'm downshifting, I'm relaxing, I'm resting. I'm reminding myself on that day off that my life's work is ultimately God's, not mine.
Yeah.
And it's so important, Jim, I think every week to remind ourselves that, look, Converge coaching is not mine.
Yeah.
It belongs to God. Freedom Center is not yours. It belongs to God. And there is this humility that I think it breeds in us, right? This where we pause and we realize that, look, this whole thing isn't dependent on me. And God can still work when I rest. That's a beautiful thing, right? Is that God's still at work when I'm taking my day off. Conversely, workaholism is a breeding ground for pride.
Yeah.
I think when we disregard that command to rest, it's easy to start taking more credit for our success than we should.
Yeah.
And man, when we go there, Jim, we are in the danger zone.
Yeah.
The distance between workaholism and arrogance is very, very short.
Yeah.
What do you think on that?
I never met a humble workaholic that really understood what they were doing. A humble man isn't powerless. He's dependent on others' power. If that makes sense. So humility is not, thinking less of myself, is thinking about myself less, if that makes sense. So there's this thought that there is it's not self-deprecation. It's compounding interest. My mortgage is doing what it's doing, whether I'm awake or asleep. It has that sort of power. The interest is compounding. I'm paying off principal. Interest is coming with it. And we understand that with our mortgage, but we don't understand that with God sometimes, that when we go to sleep, just like compounding interest, whether it's working for us or against us, God is doing what God is doing in our absence because he's our provider. I plant a seed.
That's right.
I watch it. Nothing changes. I stand over it. I talk to it. Nothing changes. I profess to it. I command it. It is going to go through its process to produce what it is and the fruit that comes with it. And that's God's job. My job is to plant the seed. My job is to study, to pray, to love my wife, to, preach the sermon. But my job is not to stand over every soul, every person, every leader, every circumstance as if I am God. It really, for us to take that position, we would have to, hey, God, would you get out of my seat, please? I'm actually on the throne. You need to get away because I'll. And I would say this, one of the greatest days of my life, I remember very clearly, was the day that I consciously resigned from being God.
Yeah.
And as silly as that sounds, I'm no longer going to try to do what only you can do, what you've promised to do, what you're capable of doing, what you're good enough to do for me. I'm no longer going to pretend that you and I are partners in this, like I'm an equal share partner.
Right.
I'm going to resign from doing all the things you say you do. And what peace comes when you stop working outside of the grace that God has given you. God will give you grace to do a lot of stuff. God will never give you grace to be disobedient. It will always feel bad. It will always create wreckage.
And Jim, you said it may sound silly, and it may sound silly, but it isn't silly.
Yeah.
What you said is not silly. The fact is that there is this tension I think we all wrestle with between what my responsibility is and what God's responsibility is. And there is this, and I don't know that we'll ever 100% master this on this side of earth, but I find myself unknowingly putting myself in that place. I'm taking responsibility for things that God is ultimately responsible for, or I expect him to take responsibility for things that are my responsibility. That's another pot. That's another pot on laziness. Okay.
That's another podcast. Yeah. And not faith.
Right. So stupidity is a hidden rock under the water that will destroy you. Yeah. Arrogance, the Bible talks about the sin of pride, right? And all the bad things that happen with that. That's another hidden danger of workaholism.
Yeah.
Let me give you one more, Jim, and let's talk about it. Is that workaholism can lead, and often does lead, to a premature exit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when we rest at proper intervals, it actually increases our productivity.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not just saying that, there are reams of research that prove it. Over and over and over again. I believe this, and I think you believe this too, that God can get more done through us over a longer period of time when we commit to a healthy work-rest rhythm.
Yeah.
You know, most church leaders that I know teach their people, and rightly so, to tithe, right? To that 10% of our income isn't ours; it belongs to God. And I've heard many preachers, and I think I've probably preached this too, that God will make 90% of your income go farther than 100%.
Yeah.
And I submit to our listeners and watchers today that the same principle is true about our schedule.
Yeah.
That when we obey God's commandment to observe Sabbath, when we walk in a responsible, healthy work-rest rhythm, we discover capacity we didn't know existed.
Yeah. Yeah. I could not agree more. It's funny that, you know, tithe, you say I have 10, you know, seeds in my hand and I plant one. Well, I only have 9. Well, you have 9 that live under the covenant of bread, but you have 1 that lives under the covenant of a seed planted.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So take the 7 days. I have 7 seeds in my hand. I plant 1. I give it to God, just like I gave that tithe. I only have 6 left. Well, that's true. I have 6 left, but you have 1 planted. The one planted lives under a completely different paradigm. The seed planted lives under a different paradigm than the seeds that are meant for bread, right? The bread is to be used. It's nutrition. It's here. It's gone. But what's planted is there to produce something more of what was planted. So for us to work 7 days a week, we're not just like tithing. We're not. You can't outgive God. Now, if you work 1 day a week, you're going to starve because, you know, that's laziness. But if you work 7 days a week, you're going to starve because you're not planting. You're not putting certain elements that God entrusted to you to give back to him that live under a different paradigm. So back to that work-rest rhythm that we talked about in the Garden of Eden, you know, if their day 1 is day 6, that's the day they're created and tasked with the whole earth, fill it, subdue it. Their first day is not a day of work after that. Their first day is a day of rest. They worked from rest, you know, that the commandment with rest to work, rather than the commandment to work until I'm exhausted. Yeah. So I agree completely. No one's going to invent some new way to reach the lost because they work 7 days a week. That's going to come in quiet time. That's going to come in green pastures, still waters, Sabbath. What's that where you take a bunch of Sabbaths in a row? What's that called? Sabbatical. Yeah. Sabbatical. You know, books are not written when you work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're written. Eugene Peterson, who translates the Bible, spent months at his cabin, I think in Montana, if I'm not mistaken. And that was his family getaway. John Mark Comer, who wrote some great books on this subject. Yeah. Young guy in his 30s, wrote with a ruthless elimination of hurry or something like that. Mm-hmm. You know, the Sabbath, the pattern, it really, and what's nice is that as we do the studies say, God was right. The 10-day work week does not work.
That's right.
The 7-day-a-week work week does not work. The rhythm we were created to prosper in, God has, it's a dictate. It's not a suggestion. It is an absolute mandatory thing. So workaholism will cause you to quit rather than finish. You will not finish well. You'll quit because of failure or exhaustion. And we've seen it far too often.
That's right. And so we would just challenge you, you know, to think about capacity differently. Yeah. That when I take a day off on a regular basis to rest and recover and rejuvenate, when I punch out at a reasonable time most evenings, I am unleashing capacity that I didn't know I had, that I didn't know was there. Capacity to love and lead God's people, you know, capacity to love our spouses, to love our kids, to love our grandbabies, right? I think I have plenty of capacity for that, but, you know, But I think there's still this mathematical problem in our head. How is this possible? How can that actually work? It's because in God's economy, his way of doing things is higher. and better than ours, incalculably higher.
Yeah.
And so, Jim, I'm going to keep watching Shark Tank because it entertains me. I'll laugh, I'll learn, I'll be motivated to work diligently, but I'm never going to, I never want to say never, because then I set myself up. I never want to swallow the lie that workaholism is the secret sauce to success.
It's not. It can't be. It would violate scripture and study and fact and knowledge. Right. Yeah. Back to Jim Baker, he wrote a book called I Was Wrong that I read probably 25 years ago. And he did the math. The number of years he worked without a day off was the exact number of days he spent in prison. Wow. And his point was, God will get his Sabbaths one way or the other. You will be alone. You'll be with him. Well, and you can do that by your will submitting to his will, or by his will being done. And I agree. Did you know that Seventh-day Adventists, those who, the denomination that takes one day off very religiously every week, they live 10 years longer than other Protestants?
It doesn't shock me.
It doesn't shock me either. That's what I'm saying. This is not like you should add this when you get everything else right. Like, you should add this from the very beginning. Yeah. One day at 7 belongs to God. Awe and rest and worship and food and strolls. I mean, it is apple orchard season in Michigan, man. If you can't sit on your back deck and watch the leaves turn colors while you drink hot apple cider and eat a donut, like, I'm not even sure you're going to heaven. Like, you're avoiding it here. You're avoiding it here. So anyway.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that. It is such a, it's interesting how through the years, and John, that the problems really have stayed somewhat consistent. That if you love what you do, this is always going to be a danger. And why don't you just recap for us some thoughts? Here we are in 2023, coming up on the last 2 episodes next week and the week after. Give us your thoughts on today's.
Well, I hope the episode has put the fear of God in some of you. And helped you have a strong reason why you need to get your arms around a healthy work-rest rhythm. Just a couple of things I thought were highlights, Jim, in episode 198, the third most listened to episode and watched episode is this. That exhaustion puts you at elevated risk. For doing something incredibly stupid. Jim, I've lost count of the number of leaders who have done stupid things because they were exhausted. And because they were tired, their defenses were lowered, and they did things and said things they would never do or say if they were well rested. I think that's the majority of the big problems, the big failures that we see. Some people have horrible character, and that's the reason they go down the tubes. But more often than not, it's because of this workaholic driven, I've got to achieve, I've got to prove I'm valuable mentality that puts pastors in a vulnerable position. So that's one of the things that's a highlight from this episode. Another one is we want to encourage you to establish healthy work-rest rhythms. Start with the daily rhythm. If you don't have a good daily work-rest rhythm, start there. Get fluent with that, and then tackle the Sabbath, the weekly rhythm. Those are 2 foundational rhythms that if you get right, you'll bear a lot of fruit, and you'll be able to do that for the long haul. And then the third one, Jim, is and this is just a principle that was shared. This is an original to me. This was shared with me by somebody else, and it was so powerful. They said, when you work and rest according to biblical rhythms, you'll discover a capacity you never knew existed. It's God's capacity. It's God's economy, not ours. And so as I thought about 198, Jim, those were the things that I drew out, and I thought, wow, those really stood out to me again.
Right on. And we hope it does for those that are watching and listening, guys. It's your story can end so well if you live your life proactively, and so poorly if you live your life reactively. Get control, get your borders, get your boundaries, get your people, get your schedule, get your calendar, Get it all, because that is the foundation from which you can build this wonderful legacy that is a great gift to the body of Christ, or you can be part of the statistics that no one wants to be a part of. So God bless you. Come on, we're cheering for you. We're rooting for you. Next week, the number 2 most watched, most useful, most listened to podcast that you have chosen by your interaction with it. And we look forward to talking to you again next week as you continue to lead from alignment.